Hello again, I'm Manisha Tank. You are watching the Global Common channel here at the Singapore FinTech Festival 2020. It is day 5, it's the Talent Summit. Now, one of the things that we are celebrating at this festival is collaboration with our partners, such as the Milken Institute. And the Milken Institute have helped us curate the following segment. The disruptions of this year's global health pandemic reinforced the importance of supporting physical and mental health for individuals. In this fireside chat, we discuss with Arianna Huffington, founder and chief executive officer of Thrive Global and founder of the Huffington Post, the best ways to maintain and build wellness and mental resilience, and how institutions can better promote the well-being of their leaders and their employees. Patel, principal executive officer at the Monetary Authority of Singapore, moderates the conversation. So let's go over to Pat and Arianna for the deep dive into wellness and mental resilience for times of crisis.
It's a real pleasure to have you with us today, Arianna. And, you've achieved so much in your career with many successful exits and a seasoned entrepreneur, and you're hailed as a media queen as well. And so as a child, I found out that you wanted to be a journalist. I'm kind of assuming that was inspired by your parents. Is that correct?
Well, my father was a journalist. And so I loved the whole kind of romance and excitement of being a journalist. So that's what I always wanted to do. But I started actually as a book writer and doing journalism on the side. But I, first of all, wrote my first book in my early 20s.
And so what led you to then study economics? Because it led you all the way to Cambridge University and you studied economics. So it's quite a big departure from this childhood dream inspired to a degree by your parents and then kind of moving into the world of facts and theories.
Well, economics at Cambridge included politics and history. It was a very broad subject, and I thought it would be a great base for anything I wanted to do in journalism.
So let's fast forward to this year, and it's been a very challenging one for people. And I just want to kind of hear, what's been one of the most inspiring stories that you've heard during this pandemic period?
Well, I'm so glad you're asking about inspiring stories because, of course, the first thing we focus on is just how incredibly challenging this period has been. A time of incredible losses of life, financial losses, but also there is a silver lining. There is the opportunity to use this period as a catalyst to improve on a lot of things that were broken, even pre-pandemic. And in fact, the areas that we're working on at Thrive Global, ending the stress and burnout epidemic, are now mainstream for everybody. But when we launched Thrive Global 4 years ago, they were already an epidemic. And the result of this frenetic way of living, this delusion that in order to succeed, you need to power through exhaustion, has led to skyrocketing rates of chronic diseases and a mental health crisis that has been dramatically exacerbated by the pandemic.
Well, I can certainly say I feel like a different person going into the lockdown period in Singapore and when I came out, because there are lots of inward looking and reflections. And so did you have any of these moments during lockdown where you were?
Yes, I find that what has been incredible for all of us at Thrive is the opportunity to bring our work, our Thrive Global app, our webinars, to dozens of companies around the world, from big companies like Accenture, Bank of America, Walmart, to smaller companies, and to see the opening to these ideas and how people in the C-suites, on boards, are now recognizing that the well-being of employees is very connected to performance. There's no trade-off between the two. So redefining the wellness category around return on investment, productivity has been a priority for us. And during the pandemic, there's been a much greater openness to that.
If we were to delve into a little bit more around the world of work during the pandemic, what would you specifically say were some of the big impacts, and what do you think will change going forward from this? Because there's been a lot of learnings by organizations, and there is a slight difference in how companies in, say, in the West and in the East operate. But it'd be good to get your view on this, because clearly you've had so many conversations with these large organizations around the world, and it'd be good to get your insight on that.
So, Pat, there are differences, but there are actually differences within the West and within the East. And we are finding, we've launched a partnership with Monash University in Australia to operate around Asia. We are working in India. We've worked in Singapore. And what we're finding is that companies everywhere, East and West, are finally looking at the data and seeing that when their employees are stressed out and anxious, it affects productivity. That's the paradox of productivity that's being recognized now, that it's not enough to optimize workflow processes and provide great tech safety protocols. We need to also address the stress levels of our employees. So we launched, for example, a mental health program with Accenture called Thriving Mind that we developed in partnership with Stanford, and we launched it to their 500,000 employees in 8 languages, and it has had unprecedented adoption because people are at the moment experiencing such levels of stress and anxiety, especially because of the uncertainty around the future. And when they take care of themselves, they're much more effective and productive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so, I've got experience of working in the UK and more recently in Singapore. And one thing I would say is a major difference I see is in the Western culture, people are a little bit more open about how they're feeling and their thoughts. Whereas what I've noticed, and it's only been a year that I've been in Singapore, it's less of a conversation. People are very reluctant to share their feelings, or very, very reluctant to share what's on their mind in terms of the stress levels or any struggles that they're going through. And have you seen that? And how can we overcome this? Because it's a big challenge from what I can see.
And that is true. But I think what we are finding now is that there is a gradual, I agree, it's gradual, greater openness to having these conversations, to be vulnerable. And often it starts from the top. People need to experience cultural permission. And that is key. I mean, yesterday we launched the Thrive Global Products and webinar with Walmart Canada, for example. And it was kind of amazing to have the CEO be there through the whole session and specifically give everyone license to speak about what they're going through, to recognize that times are tough, to know they have support. And if we can have that across the globe, whether East or West, it can make a big difference. And what I want to emphasize is that it will improve the bottom line. So this is not just a nice perk or benefit, it's actually central to the business generally.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think, there is the culture in large parts of Asia is one of success and very little around failure. So, in the Silicon Valley culture, you haven't lived unless you've failed at least 100 times. Whereas in this part of the world, it's all anchored around succeeding and how successful you are, but that comes at a price. And that's something I've certainly learned in my life and are continually learning, because I don't think it's something that it's a snapshot, it's a continual journey. And so it'd be good to kind of touch upon that and what you're seeing, and maybe some personal kind of insight on that as well.
Well, I was very lucky to have a mother who made me very comfortable with failure. She used to say failure is not the opposite of success, it's a stepping stone to success, and there is nobody who has succeeded who has not failed along the way. And I think, frankly, in the West as well, there is a lot of emphasis on succeeding only, and as a result, people are more reluctant to take risks. The other thing we're finding, and this is like our number one cultural value at Thrive, is that when people are willing to be direct, we call it compassionate directness, and express their views, express concerns when they have them, it creates a much healthier, more thriving working atmosphere than when they are very reluctant to express what they're thinking or how they're feeling. So these resentments often just fester.
Yeah, a lot of people tend to bottle this in, but I think that's really beautiful about your mother, and it sounds like she was an amazing leader as well. And so it'd be good to touch upon leadership, because one thing that leaders have struggled, whether you're a founder of a business or leading a large organization, it's been a lot of challenges for leaders. And so, what can leaders do differently, and what should they be really thinking about when they're managing their teams?
Well, I think the most important thing we find is to recognize the connection between well-being and performance,
Mm-hmm.
and to make it clear to their employees and to their boards that when employees are stressed out, burned out, or facing a risk of burnout, they are not resilient, and that affects productivity as well as their health. So we've actually launched a mental resilience dashboard that gives management and boards a score about the risk of burnout among employees and a mental resilience score. And I recognized, when I was on the board of Uber, that if we had that dashboard as a board, we would know a lot more about our people. We would know a lot more about the human capital. And that's really one of the big changes happening right now. If you think of it, Pat, customer success has been the dominant concern of companies. And now the employee experience is much more paramount. Obviously, customer success will always be key, but putting a lot more attention to the employee experience is going to be, I think, one of the major effects of the pandemic.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think measurement has been key to this, because for years you couldn't measure that element of your workforce. And so, which companies would you say have really shone throughout the year? Because I think there's been a number of them. There's been a number of companies that have been challenged as well. But which companies would you like to highlight that have done really well in terms of measurement and actually creating change within their workforce?
Well, obviously, the companies we're working with, we're very proud of their commitment to their employees, like Accenture, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Walmart, Levi's, SAP. It's kind of amazing to see that commitment, not just from the HR department, but from CEOs, CFOs, everywhere. And also, I wrote a piece in the Harvard Business Review about the rise of the CHRO, the Chief Human Resources Officer, because their department, their objectives are now paramount for the whole company. So we are seeing them becoming increasingly important, because if you don't prioritize the well-being and resilience of your employees, it affects everything.
Yeah, no, it certainly has become an even more important role than it's ever been before. Certainly during remote working, and so I kind of want to just switch gears slightly to people. So at the Singapore FinTech Festival this year, our theme has been around people and talent, and it's to kind of look at the resilience of people, but also to look at kind of upskilling and reskilling, because there isn't, say, a government around the world that isn't concerned with reskilling and upskilling and ensuring that people have work. And one of the things we're also looking at is the next generation. And so I dread to think what people coming out of university are thinking right now, some of the young children as well that are thinking about what career path and what should I be looking at. And so I actually reached out to my children and just asked them about, if you were to interview Arianna, what questions would you ask? And so they spent the whole weekend reading up about you. So the different ages. So my daughter is 13 and my son is 8 years old. And so they spent the whole weekend researching, and they were arguing a lot. But my daughter came out with a question that she wanted to ask you.
Me and Ishan are working together on this. Two of my questions I thought of, and Ishan's kind of helped it. I builded on one. So the two questions are, the first one is, what made her mindful to be resilient when she got rejected? And the second one is, who were her supporters that guided her along the way to become who she is now?
Oh, what a wonderful question. Please tell her she has a future as a journalist.
I'll send her your way.
Yes, please. So, first of all, mindfulness around failure comes from the recognition that life is more than money and status, more than success conventionally defined. And I've always been very interested in different spiritual and philosophical traditions all around the world, whether it's the Tao in China and Zen in Japan or the Stoic philosophers in Europe, who all say the same thing. It's basically about the need to connect with a deeper part of ourselves and live a good life that includes giving and goes beyond just a material definition of success. So I think that has been a very important part of my life and has informed a lot of the decisions I've made.
The second question was around any heroes, any particular people that have really inspired you. Clearly your parents have, but are there any one person that you would say that has really given you the wings to fly?
Well, what is amazing, having all the children now, is how much inspiration I'm getting from them. My youngest daughter just wrote her first book, which ultimately is all about resilience. It was just published last week on Audible as an Audible original called Map to the Unknown. And it was really the story of her being hit by a bike in the streets of New York 3 years ago, hitting her head on the pavement, suffering from debilitating headaches. But in the course of this journey of chronic pain, discovering her own resilience, discovering her own spiritual foundation. So I got a lot of inspiration because I think as we're going through a very hard time, we all are facing different challenges. And when we tap into our own resilience, it is so much easier to be able to overcome the challenges and get through to the other side, not just in one piece, but stronger and better than we were before.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And I think it sounds like there's a gift in your family of writing. So which is an amazing thing to have, to be able to take your thoughts and put that down on paper and touch people as well, create an energy. And I think just one thing, where we're coming to the close of this interview, and is there an inspirational message that you'd like to share with entrepreneurs and kind of founders of business? Because it's been very tough for so many leaders. And so is there anything that you would like to share, any advice or guidance?
Well, it has been very tough, Pat. You're absolutely right. So I don't want to minimize that at all. But also to look at this period and see what is it that we want to leave behind? What is it that wasn't working before? And I feel one of the things that has not been working is this assumption that to succeed as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you just have to burn out. It's untrue. It's contradicted by science and data, and it's good for us to leave that false belief behind.
That's fantastic. And I hope all of the founders and kind of leaders that are listening to this conversation can at least take away a couple of the great sound bites and insights that you've shared today. So thank you very much for your time. I know you're super, super busy. And if you're ever in Singapore, please, you know that there's always an open invite for a lovely dinner over here.
Thank you so much, Pat. And please say hi to your children.
I certainly will do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
What a lovely conversation. Our huge thanks to Arianna Huffington there, speaking to Pat Patel, and of course to Pat's daughter for a brilliant question. She definitely does have a future as a journalist. That was a deeper look into the best way to help leaders and employees alike maintain and build both wellness and mental resilience, especially during this pandemic.